No one recognized him when he walked into the small roadside diner just outside Austin, Texas. Dressed in faded jeans, an old brown jacket, and worn-out boots, he looked like any other tired traveler passing through town. In reality, he was Daniel Harper, a billionaire tech entrepreneur whose face often appeared on magazine covers and business news channels. That evening, however, Daniel wanted something different. He wanted to see how ordinary people lived, worked, and were treated, without his wealth protecting him. The diner smelled of grilled meat, coffee, and grease. Neon lights flickered above cracked leather booths. A bell rang as Daniel took a seat near the window. The place was busy with truck drivers, families, and college students, all chatting loudly. After a few minutes, a young waitress approached him. She looked to be in her early 20s, wearing a slightly wrinkled uniform and a forced smile. "What can I get you, sir?" she asked politely. "I'll have the steak, medium rare, and water," Daniel replied. She nodded and quickly wrote it down. As she turned away, Daniel noticed her shoulders sag slightly, as if carrying a weight much heavier than the tray she held. He brushed the thought aside and leaned back, observing the diner. He noticed a man behind the counter shouting orders aggressively, his eyes constantly watching the staff. Something about his presence made the atmosphere tense. When the steak arrived, it was placed carefully in front of Daniel. The waitress smiled again, but this time, her hand trembled slightly. As she set the plate down, she slipped something under his napkin so subtly that it was almost invisible. "Enjoy your meal," she said softly before hurrying away. Daniel picked up his fork and knife, ready to eat, but something felt off. He lifted the napkin and noticed a small, folded piece of paper. His curiosity grew. He glanced around, making sure no one was watching, then slowly opened the note. The handwriting was rushed and uneven. "Please read when alone. I don't know who else to trust." Daniel's heart skipped a beat. He continued reading, his appetite disappearing with every word. The note hinted at unfair treatment, long hours, and stolen tips. It didn't mention names, but the desperation was clear. He looked up and found the waitress again, rushing between tables, her face pale and tired. For the first time that night, Daniel forgot about his undercover mission. This wasn't just an experiment anymore. It was real life unfolding right in front of him. He folded the note carefully and placed it in his pocket. As he took a slow bite of the steak, his mind raced. He knew he had walked into the diner seeking perspective, but now, he had stumbled into a situation that demanded action. And this was only the beginning. Daniel Harper sat quietly in his booth, the folded note heavy in his pocket. Around him, the diner buzzed with ordinary life, laughter, clinking plates, the hiss of the grill, but his mind was far from calm. Every line of the waitress's message replayed in his thoughts. He had come here to observe, not interfere, yet the desperation in her words made walking away impossible. After a few minutes, he raised his hand slightly. The same waitress hurried over, her eyes flicking nervously toward the counter before meeting his. "Is everything okay with your steak, sir?" she asked. "It's fine," Daniel replied gently. "But I'd like to talk to you. When you have a moment." Her face tightened with fear. I'm very busy," she whispered. "I understand," he said calmly. "I'll wait." She nodded and stepped away, clearly shaken. Daniel watched as the diner's manager barked orders at the staff, criticizing even the smallest mistakes. When a glass slipped from another waitress's hand and shattered, the man exploded in anger. Daniel noticed how everyone flinched. The fear was real. Nearly 15 minutes passed before the young waitress returned. Her name tag read Emily. She stood across from him, hands clasped tightly. "You shouldn't have written that note," she said in a low voice. "If he finds out." "He won't," Daniel interrupted kindly. "But I need to understand what's happening here." Emily swallowed hard. "We work 12-hour shifts sometimes. He keeps our tips, says it's for house fees. If we complain, we lose our jobs. I tried finding another one, but my mom is sick, and I need the insurance." Daniel listened silently, his jaw tightening. He had built billion-dollar companies, negotiated ruthless deals, and faced powerful rivals, but this quiet injustice angered him more than any boardroom battle ever had. "Why didn't you report him?" Daniel asked. Emily shook her head. "People tried. He knows everyone. The last girl who spoke up was fired the next day." Daniel glanced toward the counter again. The manager was watching them now, suspicion in his eyes. Emily, Daniel said softly, if someone could help you, really help, would you be willing to tell the truth? Her eyes filled with tears. Yes, I just don't want anyone else to suffer. Daniel placed some cash on the table and stood up. Finish your shift, he said. And don't worry, things are about to change. As he walked out of the diner, the cool Texas night air hit his face. He pulled out his phone and made several quiet calls. Lawyers, investigators, people who knew how to uncover the truth and protect those who spoke it. This undercover visit was over. Now, it was time for accountability. 2 days after Daniel Harper walked out of the diner, everything changed. Unmarked cars began parking across the street during business hours. Customers noticed unfamiliar faces quietly observing the staff, taking notes, and asking careful questions. The diner owner, Mark Collins, grew increasingly tense. His sharp voice grew louder, his temper shorter. He had no idea that his carefully hidden system of exploitation was already unraveling. Emily felt the shift immediately. A woman in a professional suit approached her during a slow afternoon and asked gentle but direct questions about tips, schedules, and pay records. This time, Emily didn't panic. She told the truth. So did others. One by one, the waitresses and kitchen staff spoke up, supported by legal protection they never knew they could have. That same evening, the truth went public. Daniel Harper stood in front of a small group of local reporters, no longer wearing old jeans, but a tailored suit. Gasps spread through the crowd as his identity was revealed. The ordinary customer from the diner was one of the most powerful businessmen in the country. I went undercover to understand everyday service workers, Daniel said calmly. What I found was theft, intimidation, and abuse. The investigation confirmed everything. Tips had been illegally withheld, overtime hours erased, threats used to silence employees. Within days, Mark Collins was removed from ownership, facing multiple charges and civil lawsuits. The diner was temporarily closed under state labor violations. But the story didn't end there. Daniel purchased the diner, not to shut it down, but to rebuild it. When it reopened weeks later, it looked brighter, cleaner, and more welcoming. More importantly, the staff returned under new management. Fair wages, transparent tip policies, health benefits, respect. Emily stood behind the counter on opening day, hardly recognizing her own life. She was promoted to floor supervisor, given flexible hours, and medical support for her mother's treatment. For the first time in years, she felt safe. I never thought someone like you would care, she said quietly to Daniel as he stopped by once again. Daniel smiled. I didn't change your life, he replied. You changed it yourself. I just listened. The story spread across social media and national news. People praised Daniel's actions, but he redirected the attention toward the workers. There are thousands of Emilys across this country, he said in a televised interview. They don't need sympathy. They need fairness. Months later, the diner became a symbol of ethical business practices. Other restaurant owners reviewed their policies, afraid, and inspired, by the consequences. As Daniel sat in the same booth where it all began, ordering the same steak, he reflected on how a single note had exposed a silent injustice. Wealth had given him power, but humility had shown him purpose. Sometimes, the smallest voices create the biggest change.